Perfect. Welcome everyone to the November NSO Zoom meeting. We have a great guest with us this evening, Derrek Falor. He is a certified mental performance consultant, has a licensed coach for USSF, and is a active soccer referee and former collegiate player. And Derrek was on the field behind me this weekend coaching at the WPL semifinals and finals weekend. So unfortunately, we reminisced, and team didn't make it to the finals, but there's always next year. I'm really looking forward to the conversation tonight. You know, we talk a lot about tactics and look at clips and talk about what we should and shouldn't do on the field. And I think Derrek really brings a great perspective in us thinking about the game in a different way and helping us prepare better mentally for the game, and also how to be able to walk away from the game and figure out how do we do better next time. Because I think too many referees, we get into that rigor of I go ref a game and I then ref another game and then I ref another game. And maybe I'm not doing the work I need to do to be able to think about what were the good things in my game that I want to bring forward and what are my opportunities that I want to change for my next game. And I think Derrek's going to kind of walk us through that this evening. So, Derrek, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you to lead us through this tonight.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Some familiar names, certainly. So some of you have probably heard or seen my story as to how I've gotten here. I want to take just a couple minutes, hopefully not more than that, to set context for why this is important to me. So, as Richard said, I played collegiately. I also started coaching collegiately right out of grad school and spent 2 decades coaching women's college soccer at the D2 and D1 level. Um, did a stint for 10 years at Lakeside High School as a girls soccer program head, and somewhere along the way, about 10 years ago, started this private practice in mental performance, which I'm proud to say is now up to 3 practitioners. And so all along in my career, my focus has been very much on the mental side of the game, from coaching effectiveness to mental performance execution for players. And really, in the last 5 years, looking at the referee community and how all of the good work that you all do serves the game, and what we can do to enhance that. Because in the end, there's a big event happening on the field that has many, many variables, of which referees are ideally not the deciding factor, but certainly really important key variables in those outcomes, right? And however we define those outcomes is different for everybody, whether that's game won or lost or enjoyment had or whatever. But to be said, for me, the mental part of what we do as referees, I feel like because of the context that I bring, and I'm going to say this kind of harshly, I don't think as many referees pay attention to their mentality of how they prepare, how they execute, and then what they do afterwards to help themselves grow. And maybe because to an extent we get into, as Richard said, do a game, do a game, do a game, and we're running from place to place. So the goal tonight is to put some very functional, practical tools in your toolboxes. And then also my hope is that people that are here tonight, especially with some of the names I see, to help others that maybe you mentor that aren't here, learn how to apply those tools so that what we do is qualitatively bumped up, whether that's 1% or 5%. Some of you may have seen an article I wrote now. It's been about a year ago. I did a research dive on just referees and mental training, and then narrowed it down to soccer. And there just really isn't a whole lot of research out there that would support what mental performance for referees looks like, should be, or where we can go. There's some, and we'll talk about some of those key points tonight. I've definitely made it my focus in the last couple years to really start identifying through small case studies and some research dives which tools are important. So tonight we're going to discuss 3, and I'll run you through a little bit of a PowerPoint deck. We definitely have a couple breakout rooms, which I understand is maybe a bit different for this group. And then there'll be some opportunities for discussion. I think the time is going to fly. And then my last thing for this would be when we have breakout rooms and then also when we have discussions, it's going to be, I want it to be different, be a little vulnerable. right? A lot of us could step onto a U12 or U13 or U14 or even older field and probably serve the game well without really being stressed. I want you to think about what I'm asking you to tonight in situations where you would be pressed to be your best, so that when you're bringing something to the discussion in the small group, it resonates and it's personal, and there's reasons that we can say that this work matters. So with that said, I'm going to share a screen here. Okay, so really our goal is to put some tools in place that when things are challenging, we have those tools at the ready. And when you take a look at the research, for the most part, we find that there's some things that exist that aren't being done. But why mental training matters for us? To be fair, we're doing our work and it's an emotional environment. Players care, coaches care, parents care, referee assigners care. We don't go to an environment that everybody is blasé. Players and coaches are training anywhere from 4 to 10 to 15 hours a week. Referees are not doing that same amount of training, right? So what can we do to fill in that gap a little bit? We know through literature, through sport in general, that mental training will boost decision making and composure, but only if we actually do it. And then, as I said earlier, that the research that is out there will suggest that there's a few different areas of mental training that will support referee growth and development and enjoyment. And that's exactly where we're going to get to tonight, is those three topics. So what are we talking about tonight? We're talking about specific and actionable goal setting. And that's outcome, that's performance, and that's process, right? It's what all three of those components can help us to do to grow our game in some capacity, whether we're the 24-year-old that's pursuing regional and national level, or they're the person like me that came back to the efforts later in life and isn't going to be a national referee, or somewhere in between. But what can we do with our goals that helps drive that and then also helps us serve the game? Mental rehearsal, which we'll talk about, oftentimes gets interchanged with imagery or visualization. We're going to refer to it tonight as mental rehearsal mostly because there's a little difference for that, and we'll get to that in a while. And then really, as Richard talked about, a structured debriefing process. And that's more than final whistle, come together, knuckles. Hey, what did you think about that one call? It's much more than that, because again, it's not did we get the laws of the game correct? It's what did you do and how did you apply yourself in the moment and where can you grow from that? That's really the emphasis of our debriefing tonight. So let's dive right into the goal setting situation, right? We have three different categories of goal setting. We have the very typical outcome goals, right? And an example is, where do I want to get as a referee? Boost of fitness, a level attained, a certain event refed, certain level officiated. What is that outcome I'm working to get to? For most of us, I think that that's understood, but I would bet you that there's people here that haven't really thought that one through in a while. And I would say that that goal becomes the underlying motivation for us in all that we do, whatever that is. It could be just to serve the game well, but how do we serve the game well at the different levels? The performance piece, we're going to tie a little bit into the physical needs of the game, right? So what am I going to do to actually get myself to that outcome goal? And it can't just be things like work hard and study the IFAB book. It has to be some specificity in there. And then the third part with goal setting is the process. What can I do today that helps me move toward that outcome goal? These don't have to be 10 or 15 goals. They're going to be organic and they're going to change along the way, but they are really pretty important. I've settled on a good idea is to set 3 goals per each match. The number is whatever you want to make it. 3 matches the outcome, performance, and process bit, but you can set what is important for you. The one part of the literature that you can find with referees, especially soccer referees, that will suggest that performance increases can happen through mental training is structured goal setting. So there's a reason to do it. The literature supports the growth when we do it. I think logically we probably all understand that it's important. Can we take a few minutes to go through that? We'll talk about how tonight. So some examples, right? Some examples can be as an outcome goal. Earn a regional upgrade. That's a pretty obvious, definable, and measurable, and also timely goal. That isn't everybody's goal, but that's a good example. helps drive long-term motivation, helps connect the work that you do off the field, helps make sure that your attitude and body language and everything is appropriate. So there's an example of an outcome goal. Performance goals, very specific. And I'm going to say that one of the members on the call today has a part in this little one, right? The 12 to 15 yard distance, giving yourself a really specific. Now, obviously, we're not getting out a tape measure as we're running around, but do we have a specificity to our actions that we could then later go back and say, I did that? Or maybe I didn't, and what got in the way? Was it fitness? Was it angle? Was it decision? What got there? But at any rate, creating a performance goal that's measurable, at least in real time or later, gives us some data to work on, right? And then the process example could be being able to reset my own focus within 2 breaths after a missed call, or maybe a call that I made but I didn't love and I'm ruminating on it. But can I get myself to the place of building composure again with 2 breaths? So you could see where we've got the motivational goal, we've got the performance goal that gets us in the places that we can make good decisions, and then the process goal that we've set for the game is very specific and measurable. Not everybody's going to set those same kind of goals, but really that's kind of where we want to get to, right? So from a goal setting perspective, those are some examples. Now, here's where we're going to come to our first breakout room, and it's early on in the presentation, but we want to get to these places, right? So I'm going to put you into some breakout rooms. I'll have to stop sharing to do that. We'll just randomly identify them. I would like as a group, when you're in your breakout room, to discuss a little options here of what could be a good performance goal, what could be a good process goal. As a group, if you wanted to take on the idea of looking at some outcome goals, you could, although I suspect everybody's in different places. But everybody should be able to add something into a performance-based goal or a process goal, right? So what's something that's measurable? What's something that's timely? What's something that's definable? Those are all types of things that we would want to think about with performance and process. If you were being an AR, a process goal could be the mechanism with which we shift gears after making a corner kick versus a goal kick, right? We have the signal and then we have what comes next in that little pause. Process goals could be making eye contact with the center official before we go up on a ball out of bounds or not. So little tiny nuances like that, right? Those count as process. Performance goals. Again, as an AR, do I get all the way to the end line on ball outbound for corner or over the line for a goal kick? Do I make it all the way to the midline for corner kicks on the opposite end of the field? Do I hold up my flag in a certain way for substitutions? So anyway, those are all examples of performance goals. We can measure that. We can see if we got there in time, and our body mechanics are important. So again, as Richard said, well outside of IFAB rules, but what are we doing to get there that are measurable? So I'm going to stop sharing just for the moment because I need to put us into breakout rooms. So let's go with breakout rooms.
Did you see how to do it?
I know how to do it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, and let's include sign manually. All right. So you're going to get an invitation to go to the room. It looks like there's about 4 people per room, so everybody should be able to have an opportunity to share. We'll go with 3 minutes, and I'll give you a 1 minute countdown when it's time. Again, I'd like you to come back with an example or two of process goals for the group and an example or two of performance-based goals. Again, if you want to talk about outcome-based goals, you can, and those would certainly be fine. So let's see what we come up with, folks. Off you go. And then you and I can stay here, or you could pop in and join if you wanted to hear people, or we just wait here until they come back.
Okay.
Either way is fine. I find this to be actually really challenging. So I'll be really curious to see what they come up with.
Uh-huh.
Right? Because we're so focused on what are the mechanics and how did we officiate that game moment or make a choice, when we're talking about conditions and considerations and all that stuff. And that's all difficult and important, right? But yeah,
Right.
how do we then take that knowledge and bring it into how we move or how we want to handle ourselves? And so I'll be really curious to see what they come back with. Oftentimes, this is one of the tougher things that I hear referees even attempt to do, which is why I think they don't do it.
Yeah. Well, you did a nice job of giving examples on performance versus process. So that's where I'm curious on how they make those links, as well as I think they may get them mixed up, but I still
Of
think
course.
they're going to get the concepts you're looking for, because I think like you said, we're all too focused on the laws of the game and not the what do I need to do as an athlete
hmm
to perform the laws of the game on the pitch.
I had a game, it was last spring, so two boys high school springs ago. I know that now. I now know I had the flu and it was running a line at Edmonds Stadium and Vern was in the middle. And I'm like, it was too late to call out, right? It would have just been, and I'm like, I gotta figure this out. Richard, every single run, I felt like I was going to throw up when I had to sprint. It was all I could do to go turn my head to the side, keep up with the play. And my process at the end of that run was put flag in appropriate place, take a breath, keep it down. I mean, it was so dumb, but it got me through 90 minutes, right? I'm like, at the end, I'm like, I'm not shaking hands, I'm not doing anything with anybody, but that got me through, well, 80 minutes, right? I'm like, okay, that's a really extreme example, but on the day,
Oh,
it was better than I feel terrible running through my head, you know?
yeah. Yeah. Well, I think people get sloppy on those components of it because they're like, well, that's the easy part.
Yeah.
And because they're sloppy, people watching them think you really don't know what you're doing because you don't have crisp signals. You're not at the corner flag when you need to be there because you're jogging instead of sprinting.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And if you're late, then all of a sudden you're ruminating on I was late and what's happening? Am I there? And I'm catching my breath, and then I missed something and I haven't made eye contact, and then boy, you just get behind and more behind, and then anxiety goes here maybe, or yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. So I'll be very curious to see what they come back with. So idea, we'll bring them back here in a minute. I just told them we've got a minute. Um, have them share. I didn't tell them to elect a speaker, but they can share a little bit, whether it's chat or otherwise. Um, define a little bit more performance process as needed, and then we'll move on.
Perfect.
Okay, all right. I'm going to close the rooms. That'll give everybody a chance to come back. I see some chats as well.
Wait, when I'm back to the big room, can I get back?
Yep, welcome back.
No, I mean, can I get back to my room? I'm still trying to talk.
Oh, no, sorry. I guess I could have given you longer. My fault. I closed the rooms.
Oh, okay.
You're good. You can share out once we get everybody here.
Did we lose people in that transition?
Yeah, like where did everybody go? Oh, here they come. Awesome. Welcome back. We got some faces when they came back, though. Hey, Ray's in space. How you doing, Ray?
I'm good. I'm good.
All right, we're back. I didn't have you elect a speaker for each of your groups, but whether through chat or whether you want to just unmute and share, um, be great to hear what some of the rooms came up with, examples of performance goals or process goals. I was sharing a ridiculous example with Richard that I went through a couple years ago, performance and process, and it had helped me tremendously. So remember, no answer is truly wrong, but we want to kind of see what you guys came up with. So if anybody's willing to share out some performance and process goals, unmute or throw it in the chat.
Hey, Derek, I'll speak up real quick.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I had Inga and Bashir in my room, and actually I'm sharing because I didn't have a chance to share mine, but I'll share theirs. And I think what came from both of them was just around communication with the ARs. So Inga does a lot of center on alone games and like adult games, and so she's not necessarily tuned into the AR so much because she's not doing that. But then when she comes into AR games, she needs to remind herself like I need to check in. And Bashir said the same thing. Like he's like he gave an example where hey I need to be like focused on not just what I'm doing, but I like we're a team. Like the three of us are a team, and we need to I need to be like really focused on um, communicating visually with flag signals and even having pregame, like how are we going to communicate before the game? So I thought it was a really good
I
discussion.
love that. Thank you. That's awesome. What a great example of process goals for sure. Fantastic. Thank you. Other shares.
Derek, this is KD. I was in room number one with Omar and Rich, and we discussed also AR mechanics in terms of priorities. And we discussed the acronym ORB, ORB, and that in that order, the priorities of an AR is first offside, then look at the ref, then look at the ball. Because often with newer refs and even experienced refs, we tend to ball watch. And then when there's a long pass, we're out of position to make the right call because we're not perfectly in line with that next to last opponent.
Yes. So when you think about that, that's a really good process goal as well, right? Because it is something we can do on the day that will help improve our performance in that moment, meaning that we are literally in the moment as we need to be. You could even work to tie that one into a performance goal, right? There could be an element of movement into and out of that process bit, right? Because we have to move to keep up with the back line. Maybe there's a quick transition. And as we've taken our first 4 or 5 steps, now we're thinking orb, right? And then stuff happens and we have a choice to make as an AR. And now we make the choice, and then there's maybe a movement out of it. So that's a really good example of where process could put you in the right performance space to do your job. Thank you. That's awesome. Other shares. Those are really good examples to start.
I have another example. We're in room number 4 with Raymond, and I forgot the name of the other person.
Paul.
Paul, yeah. So the example was kind of like in between like performance and also process. So it was about like positioning in the field. Like start with my example, like my position on the field wasn't like as good first, and I tried to implement like many like strategies to make it like better, and it started to be better and better, and from like the process, one of the key element like that was like I kind of like measured it was it is like how many times that I interfered with play, or like I was in between like players, or one time or like the play like the ball I had to like raise like lower my head for the ball to go up or something. That was a like one of the measurement that I used like to get it like better and better each time or like each game.
Did you find that thinking along those lines helped you get into spaces quickly or in a more timely fashion? Did it affect your fitness? Can you say more?
Uh, I think it helped me like decide my next movement on each I can remember like when I like journal about it or something. I can think like this past game like the ball was in this side. I should have went to that like to this position, and I keep like improving on it on like each time. And
So I ask because that starts, you're right, it is a little bit of a combination, although it's leaning more towards process because it was working to get you into a space on the field, which drove the performance, right? So again, I like that. You had a very definable action. Basically, I'm not going to get hit by the ball, right? And what you did to be in those positions to not be in the way of the ball, that would be process. Lots of decisions that went into that for sure, right?
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. That was really good. Maybe one last one before we move on. Any other shares that are different than those first three? Okay. So I will also encourage you, I mean, there's going to be some action items coming out of this. I will encourage you to think about your performance and process goals also based on your own level of fatigue or whether you haven't done any games during the week, because these could be different based on the workload that you bring into a game. They certainly would be different for either types of surface, or maybe it's the end of a week where you've done, kind of like Inga, who does like 75 games a week. Maybe your performance and process goals are a little different on Monday and Tuesday than they are on Saturday and Sunday. Or maybe they're different if you're doing a rats game versus if you're doing a girls U12 game. So make sure you don't write these in cement and go, those are that, right? I want you to think about it of what's going to be needed for me today in what I have in front of me. And you probably have a collection of things that would suggest, here are my base foundational things I do as a referee. And then you can toggle around a little bit based on the level of the game, what your body feels like, or maybe even if you've had a really challenging day in the office or in whatever you do for your real job kind of a thing. And how are we going to work through that before we take the field? So I think as you work on this coming out of this meeting, your collection of process and performance goals that will ultimately support your outcome have some organicness to them based on the game that you've got in front of you. And that's where the magic is really going to happen for you to be the best version of yourself on that day, right? So I would just encourage you to think along those lines. Okay, we're going to go back to sharing because now we're going to talk about the next bit here. All right, so visualization, mental rehearsal. Without sort of outside of the context of this meeting, when we talk about mental rehearsal with players, we talk about the value of creating a real repetition of an executable behavior in their mind's eye, right? So being able to see what they're going to do as a player. Even with coaches that I work with or teams that I work with, what kind of behaviors do those coaches want to exhibit with their teams, whether it's pre-game talk or interacting with the officials or how they're going to interact on a training block if somebody's not making the correct choices or repeatedly making mistakes. So being able to mentally rehearse your ideal way of handling a certain challenge. And when we look at that and we kind of think about what makes those real reps, there are some very specific criteria that makes what you see in your mind's eye treated in your body and your neuromuscular system as a real rep. And I've chosen to use the PETLEP model as an example, right? We want to imagine this happening in a physical environment, right? We're not making referee choices while sitting on a stationary bike, not really. So when you're doing your mental rehearsal, I want you to imagine being on a field, right? You could be a specific field if that's helpful, but on a field is better than just walking on the street and trying to imagine yourself making a spa choice while walking down a sidewalk. So the physical environment that you see yourself doing this or executing this decision, really important that it's got that physical aspect. You want to make sure that there's a task that's definable, right? So again, let's use an AR example, thinking about the angle with which we raise an arm to signal the ball has gone out of bounds, right? There are appropriate angles and there are inappropriate angles. So makes sense to understand what is the angle that your arm needs to be, how's the angle of the flag as it extends from your palm. That would be an example of making sure that it's a task that's identifiable and it's measurable in some way. The timing issue of it is, can we see it in real speed? Now, if you're a brand new referee, you might choose to slow these things down until you could get the mechanics right in your head. But in theory, want this to be executed in real speed. So for instance, if we were going back to a flag example and you were bringing your flag up to make a symbol, you might also add the auditory cue of hearing the flag ripple through the air. Right now, there's an example of the real speed timing. Because if we bring a flag up slow, it doesn't make that sound. If we bring it up fast, we hear it, right? Is there learning involved? Can we get better at it? That's important here. And then lastly, well, not lastly, second to lastly is, what's the emotional overlay with which you're going to see yourself make this decision? So let's imagine you're coming out of a sprint and maybe it's a 30 or 40 yard sprint and you're going to have to make a spa decision and it's in a game where the temperature is already elevated. What's the emotional overlay that you want to portray in that moment of making a choice that you're going to then demonstrate and broadcast to everybody that's watching this game? Are we going to make that emotional overlay be sadness? Probably not. That doesn't help us. Are we going to make it where we're angry? Also probably not helpful. So we could look at things that are positive emotions. Is it challenging? Are we calm? Are we confident? Are we happy? You have to decide on what's the correct emotional overlay to see this executable decision. Because if we don't add that emotional overlay in our mental rep, we're not going to be prepared to use that emotional overlay correctly in the game moment when it matters. Right? So I use sadness as a funny example, of course, because you're not going to referee sad. That would be kind of goofy, but it's a good example of what not to be. Mostly we want to come at things from a high positive emotion. So challenged, happy, invigorated, things that are, energized, like that's engaged. Those are all examples of high positive emotions. I would want you to do your mental rehearsal with those emotions as the overlay of the skill you're executing. Hopefully that makes sense. And then the last part of PETLUP is the perspective. Ideally, when you are imagining a skill executed in your mind's eye, you are doing it from first person. Right? So we get really used to watching ourselves on phone. Well, I don't know how many of you watch film, but we watch ourselves on phones, we watch ourselves on screens, we watch ourselves on iPads. That's third person. To make this come alive as much as possible, can you imagine being on the field, feet on the ground, wind in your hair, if you have any, sound of the flag, sprinting, quads loading up, sound of the whistle, all of those things from first person through your own eyes? That's an example of all of the details that can make a mental rep as if you'd executed it physically. Once we've executed those in that way in our mind's eye, our neuromuscular system fires, our brains and decisions are made in that way, it gets so much easier to make that same challenging call in real life. I know when we're reading IFAB laws and we're reading through a sheet of conditions and we're looking at stuff, we're like, oh yeah, totally, I can figure that out. But then when you've got a 16-year-old boy that wants to saw another 16-year-old boy in half with his studs up, and you're ticked at this kid because he's done this thing 5 times in a row and you've told him that's enough, are we irritated, or have we seen ourselves handle that situation in a positive, proactive way? You got to see that in your mind's eye. Because the moment we handle it with anger, now we've probably taken the game in a place that we didn't need it to go. So that's where the PETLUP model comes in. All of the literature everywhere with imagery and sport will suggest that when we do those things, anticipation, confidence, and performance improves. It don't care if you're 12 or you're 67 or 80 or somewhere in between, performance improves. So why not spend a couple minutes a day or a couple times each week working through it? Some examples of things to rehearse. Obviously, SPA and DOGSO are very crucial moments to make. Oops, I don't know why we just went backwards. I can talk through the rest of it. So other examples could be coming out of a sprint, maybe where is this a corner kick? Are we coming out with a goal kick? Maybe there's a ball and is it offside? Is it not offside? And there could be an impending collision with the forward and a goalkeeper. So I would encourage you to think through some challenging situations with your mental rehearsal in that way. Also, maybe if we're new to the game or if we're coming from being a center and the next game we're in AR, do we think about, I'm going to take a couple minutes between and imagine myself making calls from the side of the field rather than the center, or vice versa. So in that case, maybe you don't use super challenging moments, you just shift your perspective. Here's the eye contact I'm going to make with the center. Here's my body language. I imagine myself transferring my hand before I go and make the offside call. So can you make these things real speed, real perspective? Can we set the intention? Can we make sure that that emotional overlay is correct? A couple times a week just sets the intention for you so that when you show up on the field, you've already seen that outcome in your mind's eye. Really, that's where we want to get to with the visualization. How you do it, when you do it, any of the research out there on mental rehearsal would suggest there's no right time or wrong time of the day to include it in your work as a referee. I will share with you that my way to prepare for a game, if I have time, would be to get on my bike and warm myself up a little bit. I found this funky little YouTube channel of a guy that talks through decisions. I might pause the YouTube channel when he's made a decision, get off my bike, stand up, and then visualize myself making that same call. Like that would be an example of where if I were doing a middle, that's how I would prepare. That works for me. I'm not saying you all need to do that. Others could get to the parking lot and take a couple minutes in the car and just go, what's the level of my game today? Have I seen either of these teams? Do I know anything about this? What's the tempo that I need to make calls? What's the tenor I want this game to be? Some of us might want to get down to the field and put all of our kit on, walk around the field as we're checking it, maybe pause at a goal line or pause at the midline, take a breath, visualize making a certain kind of call, feel it, see it, be there. We just set the intention. For some of you, maybe the best thing to do is at night, right? If you know you've got a decent game tomorrow or a bigger game, maybe we can visualize, the night before as our head hits the pillow. Looks like Ray is just thrown into the chat. Yes, I think you can visualize, but maybe not while driving, Ray. I'm not a big fan of that one, unless you have a different method of driving than I do. However, yes, I think depending on how that works for you, I think any of that stuff or any of those times can set our intentions for how we're going to be. And again, I'm looking at this from having taught players this stuff literally for 3 decades of how to prepare to do certain actions. I can only assess from watching referees do the same thing that they would be benefited by this same work. I know some of us do it. I know not everybody does. So I would challenge us to find some time a little bit each week to go through this. So these are just some summaries, right? You've been looking at the screen now for a little bit. So the kinesthetic is what we feel, flag in the palm, sprinting, movement mechanic, hard stops, jumping over the ball, body language, auditory cues, obviously whistles, flags, sounds, coaches, players, real speed we've talked about, correct motional overlay, first person if possible. And I think because our attention span right now in Western society is pretty short, I'm a believer that these sequences should be kind of a 6 to 10 second type sequence, right? So action, choice, impending choice, we make the decision in our mind's eye, the executable, whether it's the flag up or it's the whistle or maybe the verbal command for the players to knock it off, right? And then end. If you felt like you could extend yourself a little bit more, then maybe you extend that another 3 or 4 seconds to then place the ball or whatever happens, and then the next touch happens. I think most of us are better with shorter sequences than trying to imagine our best game ever kind of a thing, right? So short, repeatable. The last thing I'll say about visualization before I send you to your breakout rooms would be quality over quantity. So if you start seeing stuff in your head and it's murky and it's not clear, you're not really doing yourself any favors. If your concentration is such that you could imagine seeing a sequence once or twice to lock in a plan of action, and that's all you've got, then just see it once or twice. If you're having a day where you're really loving it and you're digging it and you're grooving on it and it's 10 minutes and you're just really enjoying seeing how you're going to handle game moments, and that day feels like you could go for 10 or 15 minutes and your breathing is controlled, then go for it, right? It's as valuable because it's clear. So no right or wrong time, quality over quantity for sure. Definitely want quality with this. Setting the intentions for what we want. So I'm going to send you back to breakout rooms. You will not be in the same ones. Maybe come up with a challenging sequence that you would like to be able to see in your head, or maybe a sequence that you find would be beneficial to be able to see in your head for games that you might have in the next couple weeks. That's kind of the guts or the prompts for your conversations. Challenging moments you'd like to be able to see in your ideal outcome or response or choice, or maybe something that has challenged you in the past, and could you create a sequence around that? Again, keeping in mind it's probably 6 or 10 seconds. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing. We'll create breakout rooms. See you in about 3.5 minutes. You all have invitations. Go. Sign. You could go to that one. And you could go to that one. Okay. A couple rooms that have one more person because for some reason they were unassigned. I would be really curious to send out, like when you send out the what did you think about the presentation, it would be really interesting to ask some questions. How many times people, or if they do, spend visualizing anything as a referee? I know Ray does because I've talked with him about it, but it would be interesting for our perspective to hear how many do. I suspect, if they're being honest, it's not very many. But there's such a good way to set your intentions and help transition from the work of the day to the work on the field just with what we see in our mind's eye. But, we'll see what people say here. This will be hard for them too. All right, we'll run through the debriefing. Again, in the session summary that you send out, Richard, I will give you the link to the Thrive debrief that I use with referees. And if any of them want to do it, I'm happy to have them do one. And I can even respond so they could get a sense of how that works. If they don't, it's fine. But to actually give them the tool to work with. One of the articles, I don't remember if I sent it to you, but one of the articles I wrote up with the group that I kind of collected debrief information from. So I'll send that to you too if they want to read it, but might as well put the tool in their hands.
Yep, that would work perfectly.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't think there's a lot of actual, I'm not gonna say I don't think, I know there aren't. There just aren't a lot of actual structured debriefing mechanisms out there, not for this work. There just aren't.
No.
And there should
No,
be.
I know USSF does, the reflection piece that they've, really tried to push. I think I've noticed with the referees that are trying to advance their careers, they definitely are finding ways to incorporate that into what they're doing on a regular basis. But I think we've just got to do better at getting the information out to other people and using it, because I know I use it, and it helps you improve. It better prepares you for your next time you encounter that situation that you don't feel like you handled well.
I had one of the first boys' high school games that Dave stuck me on was a single A. SAS was playing at Kings, and I didn't understand until later that those two teams pretty much don't like each other a lot. Thanks, Dave. And it was heated, like right from the get-go. And there was a moment at the end of the game where keeper goes for a ball, hits the ground, ball's loose, forward from the opposition comes in, scrum's happening, forward kicks at the ball, misses it, hits keeper in head. Right. And so, we did it, and Ingrid was with me and Han was with me, and we worked through it. And I think in the moment we handled it pretty well. After the game, sure enough, Brad comes over with his iPad. He's like, this, and he's not wrong. And I'm like, but that was like an example afterwards of just debriefing myself. Like, how did I handle that? What would I do better next time? And I've thought about that a lot over the coming, kind of the next couple of years. And I would want everybody to be able to be reflective like that and go, well, this thing happened, but what am I going to do about it? Right.
Yeah.
All right. I gave them the notice. I'm going to close the rooms.
As we all know, those situations will rear its ugly head again in another game we have down the road.
100%. Yeah, and we'd be silly to be surprised that it comes up again, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It looks like they have 36 seconds left, so they'll all probably pop in right at the end. I love that they're taking all the time. That's awesome. Probably should have given them more. Okay. All right, welcome back.
Oh, I made a 2-score game.
All right, so maybe we get another 2 or 3 shares of sequences that you discussed that would be helpful to be able to see in your mind's eye, either to help kind of correct something you've done in the past and you'd like to do it more effectively, or maybe an impending challenge in the next week or two that you would expect might happen based on what's coming. Anybody feel like offering up a sequence you all came up with or shared within your group?
I
Good,
guess I'll
like,
start again since I was room one, but with Omar and Rich again. So we talked about set pieces and visualizing what our movement will be based on our anticipation of the play. We talked about a corner kick, on not being stationary from where we started and anticipating where that ball might go and scanning around us. We talked about how there was an MLS incident where an attacking player on a corner kick ran into the ref. And if the ref had just scanned behind him, realizing that that is a potential play, then he could have moved and not been involved in that play. So that was one example of visualizing our movements after the ball has been kicked.
That's a great, I love that. Thank you. What a good example to get us started. Another one or two.
Yeah, I can share for group number two. This is Ernest. I think one of the things we discussed with Adam and Chris is that very often, we visualize the conversations that are going to happen at the end of the game because we may have missed a call or we may have, had a difficult conversation with a player or coach. And we know at halftime or at the end of the game, those questions are coming. So we're visualizing the conversations in advance. We're preparing for those because we know that sometimes those are inevitable. And so, practicing emotional intelligence for someone that is, not necessarily good at it, it takes a lot of practice. I mean, I practice it all the time in terms of visualizing conversation because let's face it, for 90 days, we manage personalities. That's what we do. And we never know what we're getting, who we're getting. If we know the teams, yes, but if we don't know the teams, there are surprises that can come our way. So being calm under pressure is probably one of the key characteristics of a good referee. And I think that is key in our decision making. And I think brings the temperature down when everyone sees that they're dealing with a calm referee. Calm, but assertive.
Awesome. Thank you. That was really well said. Thank you. Any other room want to share?
yes, an area that thinking about visualization is those situations where you have a hard foul, player injured, little chaos on the field, perhaps have a coach coming on the field without you asking him to. And how do you handle that in that moment so that you could stay calm, make sure you're not letting players get out of control while you're trying to help deal with a injured player on the field?
Yep. I think all of those are really challenging. There's lots of levels and variables in all three of those. I think, if you imagine going back to when you were first learning to be a referee, and now, or if you imagine being a younger teen referee versus an adult referee, all three of those examples would have various nuances that would be super different, right? So there's so much fertile ground there to work on those mental rehearsal bits in your mind's eye so that with the skill set that you have as a referee, you can apply a really appropriate choice based on what you know and based on what the game is. I love those. Those are three really good examples. I think one of the ways that's really helpful with mental rehearsal is to work them into either your outcome goal or some of your performance goals, right? So your sequences can emanate out of what's important to you. Maybe you say, okay, this week I've got Tuesday and Thursday games. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time Monday and Wednesday working on some sequencing. On Monday, I might work on set pieces, and Wednesday, I might work on coach management. And then so you write out a couple of your things before you kind of take your breaths and close your eyes. That way, you're not making it up on the spot. You've already committed to your sequences as part of the stuff that is, your outcome-based goals. So just kind of tying in, now we've got mental rehearsal tied into and supporting the growth with your goals. All right, we'll wrap up this slide deck here, kind of work through the last. So, all right, so now the third part is debriefing. And I just shared with Richard at the conclusion of this, when he sends out his, here's what happened and what do you think about it, I will include the Thrive referee debriefing link, which I invite all of you to use if you wish. Obviously, I don't usually do that except for clients, but with this group, if anybody wants to go through that debrief and use it as a link and garner any comments one way or the other for me on the mental side of it, I'm happy to provide that for the group. So anyway, that's there. So what is debriefing? Well, it's reflection versus just ruminating on a thing. What did we do? What are we going to do about what we did? What are we going to do next? Much different than just repeating and looping. We want to use key questions that are more than just the laws of the game. Certainly, how did we apply the laws of the game is really, really important, but more than that, right? And those three examples were really good examples in the visualization that could also become part of the debriefing. How did I handle that moment when the coach came on the field not being beckoned? How did I handle that conversation that I knew was going to come up? How did I handle that hard foul? And then I would suggest strongly that you give yourself a time limit, right? I said 10 minutes here, but that's just, it's just kind of a sort of good best practices. It doesn't have to take a half an hour, doesn't have to take an hour. Some people, maybe they don't even want to do their debriefing until 6, 7 hours or the next day, but commit to it. Take some time. Just give yourself an end time. All right, so things to ask yourself that aren't part of the structured debrief. What were your goals?
Yeah. Can I ask a question or make a comment?
Yes, please, Ray.
In my spot, I want to suggest that it's not an option to wait time after the game. I think that after every game, unless you're at a tournament to where you're rushing from one game to another, I think it's important to take a few minutes, at least a few minutes amongst the crew, to discuss the good and what needs to improve. It's fresh in your mind, because when you let too much time go away, you forget about it, and then it's out of sight, out of mind. When if you talk about it right away, it sticks more in your head.
Thank you. I would add to that as well, and this is maybe me coming into this profession or activity or whatever those of us call it that do it on the side later in life. Those debriefs, if we handle them well, all 3 or 4 voices need to be heard. Like so many times the center will say, well, here's what I thought, here's what I thought, here's what I thought. And you've got that 18-year or 16-year-old AR that's like, I don't even know if it's okay for me to chime in here. But I guarantee you there were things that person thought that were important to that discussion.
When I debrief a match, I always go backwards.
Perfect.
I always go the fourth official, if there is one, then AR2, then AR1, and then the referee, because we tend to focus on the referee. So I love what you just said. So I think that in the future, I'm going to tweak it and say, I'm going to always talk to the least experienced member of the crew first, because like you said, they don't have confidence to speak up. So I'm going to give them the respect to let them speak first. So I learned something new tonight. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's social order, right? We fall victim to it all the time. But how do we get our younger referees to be better if we don't give them a voice in those moments and help them, maybe encourage? I mean, here I was coming back to refereeing at 52 and I had a bazillion questions, and I was lucky I had people working with me that were willing to share and give me some voice. So yeah, thank you, Ray. I love that aside. So things to ask yourself, what were my goals? Did I meet them? Where was my calm? Where was my not calm moments? I guarantee you fatigue is a factor, whether it's you sprinted and covered 8 miles or whether it's the third game in a tournament, right? There is stuff that factors in that we have to pay attention to, right? So where did fatigue or emotion come in? Really great questions. Ask yourself, and don't fool yourself, right? We're all tired if we've put in a good 90-minute game, and there's an effect on how we choose things. What was the communication players like? Really good questions to ask. Not what did you think they needed to hear from you, but what was the communication like? And then, what will you repeat that went well? What needs a little tweaking? Those are just some good examples of things that I think you can ask yourself. You'll see at the bottom there, I said, again, I'll share the link out. It's a little more structured. Ray was helpful with me creating that and went through it a little bit too. So anyway, we'll move on. But the debriefing part is how we learn. It's how we can be accountable. We don't work with the same crews all the time, so we have to be accountable for ourselves and growth and then bring something into the next thing that we do. All right, so last little bit here before we wrap. I posted an article today. I'm not sharing the data here. I'll share the article with you later. But when you think about the level that some of us referee and officiate and the distances we cover, if we're a middle or a line, fatigue is a factor, anaerobic fatigue and load is a factor. The more tired we get, the higher our heart rate, the narrower our focus becomes. That affects our decisions. It also affects how we evaluate and review our growth going forward. So the data would suggest, and I'm sure many of you have seen this, but at higher level games, ECNL stuff from probably U16 and above to college to pros, referees that are in the middle, you're covering 5.5 to 8.5 miles a game. And if you haven't run one of those or never will, just know that is a lot of ground to cover. That is as much, generally speaking, as a center mid. ARs obviously cover less, but the movement pattern is different and it's more explosive, filled with stops. We have to factor that in when we're thinking about rehearsal. We have to factor that in when we look at end game or end half decisions. And we also have to think about what we're going to feel like making a sprint for 60 or 70 yards and then having to make a hard call. Our attention is going to be different in a fatigue state than in a sitting here in front of a computer screen state. So as you're preparing, as you're debriefing, as you're rehearsing, that has to be part of what you think about. You can make sure that you prepare yourself really well for visualizing those kinds of things and thinking, when I'm tired, here's how I will narrow my focus to the right moment in the game. So again, using fatigue to drive goals and action. All right, so when we put this all together, this is me, but thinking about it, right? Do we train it? Are we creating a plan of action? We go out and do our thing and referee or officiate, or maybe it's just your training day on the field or on the track. What are we doing with our goals? Then we reflect after we've done our work on the field, and then we mentally rehearse to prepare for the next rinse, repeat, right? It's a nice, easy cycle of work, right? We've got our outcome goals, we've got our process goals, we've got our performance goals. We think about those, we train or do our work, reflect on it, rehearse what went well, how do we do it again, or rehearse, it didn't go as well as I would like, here's how I will do it next time to have an ideal outcome I want, rinse and repeat. Over that cycle, accountability is driven in. That's how we get better. So, final action plan. Mentally rehearse as much as you like, right? But I think a couple times a week is important. Structured debriefing is important. Making sure you give yourself some off-field time to reflect and plan and prepare, right? So we've got a little bit of time afterwards to think about it, car ride or home. We spend a little bit of time before we get to matches, thinking about how we're ideally going to handle things, what's coming up, what are challenges. This is maybe my soapbox, but if you're doing any extra work to prepare physically, do interval work, because steady state running is not this game, right? We run, we stop, we change direction. So as we're working to prepare our mental rehearsal, as we're working to prepare our body, as we're thinking about how we're going to handle stuff, just make sure that's reflective of the game actions as well, because this game is free flowing. Maybe 3 goals per game, all the way back to the beginning of tonight, right? Do you have a process or performance goal? Maybe 1 or 2 of those. Do you have 1 or 2 process or goals to support that work on the day? I don't think you need to write down your outcome goal every time. That should be known. And then, as Ray said, and then I'm saying, you got to debrief each match, right? What did you do that was well? How am I going to do it again? What did I do I didn't love? Okay, what is my fix for that? So I'm going to stop sharing and open up the floor for questions, comments, or just other general thoughts.
As you guys think about that, I'm going to put the exit survey in the chat. Please fill out the exit survey. For those of you that fill it out, I will pass along the form that Derrek is going to share with us, so that way you can utilize that tool. So also, I hope Derrek found, I actually shared with him our exit surveys from the last few webinars, which I think helped him kind of formulate some of the information tonight based on what you guys have asked for. So we use the exit survey information. Please fill it out.
Yeah, that was super helpful, actually. Super, super helpful.
Okay, what questions you guys got for Derrek now?
Silence means I was perfect or they were uninterested. Probably neither are accurate.
No, I'll go ahead and start out.
Okay.
Again, I like how you break down the whole session today. Me and one of the guys I talked to quite a bit, we just use the term having a plan. I think that the information you gave today was letting people know that you just don't go out there and referee. I think a lot of people get a badge, go to the website, sign up for a game, go ref the game, blow the whistle, and then come away from the game with a lot of questions. And basically what you said was, I'm giving you a tool for all the questions you might have after the game to ask yourself before your game starts. And I just use the phrase, have a plan. This isn't about just going out there for whether it be 60, 70, 80, or 90 minutes and blowing your whistle and then going home. I mean, again, it's a job, it's a business. And as I tell people, what you do affects what I do in the next game. What I do affects what all you do in the next game, because if I'm crappy, that's going to affect how people deal with you. And if you teach people how to be better, they have a direct effect on the next set of referees who are going to work these teams that you just got done with. And it's going to make for a better situation for them because you're better at what you're doing. You're better at your craft. And so for me, I just use the phrase, have a plan. And I think, Derrek, you just told everybody about my plan. You gave them the long version, and I would give them the short version. Just have a plan. I don't care what it is. Have a plan.
Players have a plan. The coach has got a plan. We better have a plan too.
Well, thank you, Dave. This is Bashir. Thank you so much for sharing. I think we learned a lot. Now we're back to those action plan and smart way of executing the action plan. And I think visualization is something that I use all the times, not just about the reffing, is about everything, about your day-to-day things, and include reffing or decision making. It's great, especially when you run in the morning and you have those things comes up and calls that you make that you should have, or I could have, but it's really put you back into that thinking process. Thank you.
Thank you, Bashir. Well, and here's the thing, right? We all know that we should do stuff, but when you don't have a plan, sometimes it gets pushed aside. So I think that's why I tried tonight to give us some structured things we could just buy into and say, okay, just do this, right? Because then we don't have to come up with a plan on our own, right? Here you go. Here's some tools. Just do it, run with it, and be your excellent selves. Thank you.
Also, the process to get there, and I think that really is going to give you that routine in the process. But yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Other thoughts or questions?
Hey, Derrek, this is Ernest. I think I really enjoyed your presentation and it was eye-opening. And I think what you're describing is really an environment that many referees, we should all have this discipline. I think having the discipline to do these things sometimes is, key to success. And I think that discipline is sometimes, the routine that we develop to make things happen. And I think we see these things at higher level, let's say more competitive games where the referees are significantly better than probably different type of games. We see more and more disciplined as we see the competitiveness of the game rising. What are your suggestions for situations where perhaps the games are not as competitive and the crew is not as not as good as perhaps in situations where you have U17, U18 ECNL games?
So I think that's really getting to the heart of external motivation versus internal, right? And if we're waiting for the situation to bring the best out of us, meaning, gosh, I got assigned a U18 ECNL game, and now I'm going to be good, the chances of you consistently meeting that be your excellent self is diminished. Versus if you're like, every time I show up at the field, here are the things that I do specifically that are measurable, that help enhance this game in this moment. So I would say the level that you referee matters in the way that you assess force and intent and what you allow in the game, but your behaviors and actions have to be consistently at your ideal best self. And in that way, it won't matter if you're U12 or U18 or pro or college. You will have an ideal collection of things that define you at your best, and the actions that you're going to choose show up every time, any field, anywhere for you. That's how I would look at it. So now it's internal motivation, not external.
Right, right. I'll share a quick story. A few weeks ago, Ray, you probably remember this Starfire field, I want to say 3. I had a U16 competitive game. Extremely, high level of fitness required. Ray walks up to me halftime, and he said something in the last Zoom meeting, and what he said is that you never know who's watching. And so Ray walks up to me halftime and he says, "Hey, I want you to be 5 yards closer." I said, "Got it." Remember that, Ray?
Yes, I do. I do. Yep. Always wearing the coaching hat 24/7.
That's right.
Any other thoughts or questions about what we covered tonight that maybe you want some additional clarity on?
Derek, I've heard this presentation a time or two, and every time I learn more. And I echo what some of the people and you said about discipline, where you need to do it so you can practice it and apply it consistently. There are so many times when I find myself practicing things that don't specifically have to do with soccer. So whether it's an ECL game or an adult game or a little kids game, it might be managing tempers, it might be managing the sideline. It's not specific to soccer. And then there are other times where it might be, a wall or something. So that this can be applied to so many different situations, and it's always helpful.
Oh, thank you, Inga. Thank you very much.
Hey, Derek, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. This has been a outstanding presentation. I'm going to find ways to get you back again with this group because, like I said, I think this is helping us on the mental side of the game that we don't work on enough, and it is what helps to improve our product on the pitch. And whatever things we can do to improve it, I know that our coaches, players, and spectators appreciate the time that you all are investing to be better referees.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Yep. So with that, I'm going to end the recording.